Hello, good morning, good afternoon. Welcome to our webinar today about how to create connectors and make available for the public view. Here is Fabio Rosa. I'm the CEO and founder of TagoIO, and I'm here today with Henry Sneed, who is going to present the details about how to create connector. We are very excited to run this today, and we are going to be recording this session so you can watch later or share with others. Also, we're going to have the question and answer session at the end, but feel free to make questions at any time. There is a chat on the bottom or Q&A button that you can press and add the questions or comment. We'll try to reply in real time if possible. Otherwise, at minimum, you're going to cover at the end of the presentation. So let's go to the webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the connector. And before Henry starts to go to the admin here and present to you how to do that exactly, I want to give a few words here about the system itself. Okay, so in the documentation, we have this diagram, very simple, that shows exactly how and where the connector works and where the connector is located. Okay, let's say that you have a device on the left side. You want to send this device connected to Tag and send this data to your account, to the storage system. In our case, we call that bucket. To get the data from the device to us, you need to pass through two things. First, the network. Okay, the network is where it's going to do the connection between the device through a different protocol that you need to pick. For example, it can be native HTTP, of course, HTTPS, or MQTT, or any other thing. For example, you can connect LoRaWAN, Sigfox, TCP/IP, UDP, and so on. If this connector already exists, as those that I just mentioned to you, you can simply use that and use a connector that the origin block here that's gonna be specific for the device that you have in your hand. Okay, we're not gonna cover the network today. We're gonna have another session teach you how to create a network if you need. But again, if you connect LoRaWAN, HTTP, MQTT, you don't need to do that. Okay, it's already done. It's ready to go. What we're going to be covering here is the orange block. That's the connector. What the connector does basically is it gets the data that comes from the device through the network and extracts that information through the payload parser. Okay, so Henry's going to show step by step how to do that. Have in mind that if you are adding a device to your account and this device is already there, you don't need to do anything. You don't need to create a connector. You just add the device. You only need to create a connector when the device is not in the list. You want something very specific, maybe because there is something new, or maybe because you are building a specific sensor and of course it's not available. And the other part that Henry is going to mention here quickly is that you can create your connector just for you, what you call private connectors. You test it, and if you wish, you can turn that connector public. You mentioned that you want to turn it public. There is a small switch there that you need to switch, and our team will evaluate. If everything goes well, you'll be able to make that connector public, so anyone can use. So if you are a hardware provider, for example, you will make your connector available for everybody. And it's very easy to do that, and there is no cost. That's it for the introduction. Let me pass here to Henry so he can go and show you step by step how to do that. Henry?
All right, thanks, Fabio. So I'm going to start by adding a traditional connector. So you'll start in the homepage and then go to Devices. Here, you'll click on Add Device. And so this scenario, you have a device that is currently unsupported. So you want, I'm going to use the LoRaWAN TTN network. So assuming that your device isn't among the current connectors listed, you'll need to create a custom device for the Things network. So here you can name your device, enter its EUI. I'm going to do that real quick. And I've already configured the connection through TTN to this mock device. If you do have to generate that, you'll need to generate an authorization to create that connection between TTN and Tago. And so now I've got my connector. So the most important part is going to be the payload parser. And if I turn on the live inspector, I can monitor any device traffic being sent to or from the device. And so if I get a payload sent from the network from TTN, that means that the device has sent data to TTN and then it's been sent to Tago. And so now I can see that the data is appearing here. If I go to my bucket here, I can see 11 data has been added. So if I go to the bucket, I can see the variables that I have here. So most of these are sent from the network itself. The payload is what's important here. That's what you want to parse to get the relevant information for your device. So if you have a device that's sending temperature and humidity data, you need to parse the payload, which is usually a hexadecimal value, and you need to parse that. And that's going to be specific to your device. So the parser is going to be different for each device. And so I'm going to enable my own parser. And in this example, this is using, I'll use the parse example that's provided. And in here, a few things to note. If you want to debug your parser or work with it, you can use console.log to log to the live inspector. So let me turn this back on. And if I want to check, or I can just console.log something arbitrary just to make sure it's working. And then if I click save, and then go back to the live inspector, and if I get a new payload sent from the device, I should find, okay, here we go, test. So I can now start debugging. So if I want to print, say, the raw payload to see what that looks like, I can instead type payload raw here. And now when data is sent through, I'm going to see the printout of the raw data. So once you have your parser, you've gotten it to the point where you want it, and it's parsing the data correctly and returning all the variables to your bucket. You're good to go with this connector. However, if you only have one device, this is perfect. But if you have more, if you have, say, 200 of these devices, you're going to have to do this 200 times manually as far as adding the parser for each device. And that's going to be tedious. So one more thing to mention before I move on is the configuration parameters. So here you can add, if you can add a variable that's going to be entered by the user. So if it's specific to the device, you'll give it a default value, and then the user will end up editing that based on the device. So that'll become more clear when I'm creating a custom connector. Okay, so this device connector is finished. And now if you want to scale it so that you can have this available for many devices, you're going to want to create your own connector. So you go back to devices, you go add device, and then you click on create your own connector. And once you create it, it will be listed under my connectors. So here, you're going to want to click on add connector, and I'm going to name it. Next, I'll choose the network for it, and that will be LoRaWAN TTN. Now I need a description, and I can add a URL. And if you want to see where these will be printed, you're going to want to hover over the little light bulb icon, and you can see where these will end up. And that's a little helpful when you're trying to figure out what these mean. So I'm going to do a short description. And I'm going to add a picture for it. So here's a good example of what it will look like in the end. I'm not using obviously Curlink or this device, but this is an example of what a device will look like. So you have the picture in the top left, and that's whatever picture you enter here. And then you have the network, and so mine will be LoRaWAN TTN instead of Curlink. And then you're going to have a description, device name, you're going to have main information, and you can also have advanced information. So on the next page, documentation, you need a description. You don't have to have these fields completed for your own personal, if you're just creating a connector for yourself. However, if you do want to make your connector public, you need to have all the fields configured and filled in completely. And so that's what we will be reviewing if you do submit it to be public. So I'll cover that more in a moment. So here you provide a short description. So I'll add that there, and then the completion text. So this appears once the installation is complete. And something interesting I can do here is, let me go ahead and save this. And I can add a dashboard template here. And so if I go to this simple dashboard, I can go into the settings and click on distribute. Here I can get the template link for it. I'll copy that, go back to my connector. And to edit your connector, you will go back to create your own connector and then just click on it. So here in the documentation, now I can add a link. And now under device annotation, I can fill that out as well. And so I'll save that and now move on to device parameters. So device parameters, as I mentioned before, these are going to be the same thing as configuration parameters. So I'll have frequency, I'll give it a default value, and you can use alias to, so say if it's a variable that's something like that, you can use an alias so it displays better. So you can do frequency, and then the type will be number, and I'll give it a default value of 1500. Now here I can decide I want it in the main section or the advanced section or to be hidden. The advanced section will mean that this input is voluntary and not required. If I put it in the main section, it will be a required field for the user to create the device. So I'll put it in advanced so that this is optional. And now for the parser itself, this is where you would load the same parser that works for the device. And in my case, I'm just using the parse example. And now under more, I have the option to make it public. So I'm going to go ahead and save this device and show you what it looks like. So once the connector is saved, I can now say I have the other 199 devices I want to add. I can just go back to add device and go to my connectors. And then for each of these devices, I just have to now enter the EUI, and I can edit the frequency for each. And I can see the description is posted here, and the picture is right up here. And so it's much easier. I don't have to now load the parser for each one of these, and it's a much more sophisticated way of doing it. So I will now show how to make it public. So another thing you can always do if you want to learn how to make the connection between your network and TagoIO is go to the documents, which is linked here. I just wanted to point that out real quick. So going back to edit the connector, I can go to more. So if I want to make it public, I just have to press that button and I'll be taken to a help ticket, and all this information is already filled in with the connector ID. I just have to click open a ticket. And again, when you're doing this, what's going to be reviewed is the description for the connector and all the documentation for it. As far as the parser script itself, if that works, we're not going to test your parser with your specific device, because that device is either something that currently doesn't exist that you're making, or it's something specific to your company. And so we're not going to test that for its validity, but we will check the documentation to make sure that is correct. But it's up to you to make sure that the parser itself actually functions. And once you make that public, you'll still be able to use it. It'll just be available for everyone else as well. So now I'm going to go ahead and try to use my connector to see the final output of it. So here I have the template link that I provided earlier. And if I click on that, then I'll be taken to a page to download the template. So this is a useful way to use that field you have available. And then again, you're prompted to generate your authorization. And you can immediately create another device. So if you're trying to add many devices, it's again much more convenient. And I'm going to click finish. And so yeah, that's how you add a connector that you can then use repeatedly to add many devices. And it's much more convenient than just adding for each individual device based on its UI. So I think we can open for questions.
Okay, that's great.
Is there anything else you want to cover?
Yep. Yeah, if anyone has any question, feel free to make using the Q&A option on the bottom. So I'd be glad to answer, okay? Overall, again, that's very important to understand how the connector helps you because there are a lot of features. It's not only about the parser, right? For example, Henry just present that you can have parameters. So we have customers that are using one sensor and they add values through parameters based on the physics of the system. For example, if you have a sensor that reads the height or the distance of a level inside the cylinder, maybe you can be able to collect data around the radius of the cylinder and do this calculation in the parser. So there are a lot of things that you can do. So it's a very good start.
The documentation for this, again, will be under connector overview. So if you want to see how this works, just go to the help center here on the question mark, and then you can be taken to this page. And you can learn more about it here as well.
Yeah, one question here is when can I add one connector for different LoRa? I think the question is about how can the person select the connector and use a different network. Will that work or not?
Okay, so if you want to go back and edit it, you can then select different networks, and it should work for all of them. You don't normally need to add multiple because generally you only have one gateway set up, and but in the case that you want to switch it or you have multiple gateways you're using for this device, you can select any number of other networks, and depending on how your parser is set up, it should work for all of them. And you can save that, and so it should be updated. As far as what displays, it will work for all of the LoRaWAN, but the display will likely remain what was initially chosen as a network. But you can always just copy the parser and then create a new connector as well.
Okay. Yeah, another question is, if I edit the payload parser in a connector later, will it affect the previous devices that I create with that connector or not?
Yes, so when you're editing this parser, the edit will be true, I believe, for all of them. Can Vitor confirm that?
Yeah, it will work for all of them.
Yeah.
Okay, so yeah, so if you are to go back and edit the parser here, it will update the parser in all of the devices that are using this connector.
Yeah, in fact, that is one of the big advantage of using a connector. Because if you want to just create a parser for one sensor, you can just create a device, a custom connector, and then add the parser. It's going to work. But if you want to add more and more and connect them, so it's better that you create a connector, and if you need to update later the parser, you just need to do this in one place. And all the devices, real devices create using that connector, will be automatically updated.
Yeah, especially if you discover a bug in the parser and it's wrong and you've just created 200 device connectors. It's much more convenient to be able to edit from one central spot to fix the issue in all of the devices. So that's a really important feature.
Okay, good. So I don't see any other question here. Is anyone has any question? Just please write in here. Okay, so we don't have questions, additional questions. So thank you again for your time. This video will be uploaded soon in our website under the TagoIO/videos/webinars. So you'll be able to get it and share with others. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you very much, Henry and Vitor. Have a great day.
Thank you.